Think about the last time someone corrected you with complete confidence. They didn't hesitate, didn't check anything, just said it, the way you say something you learned in school and never questioned again. That's the thing about historical facts. The more everyone repeats them, the more solid they feel. And the more solid they feel, the less anyone checks. Some of the most confidently repeated stories in history. The ones your teacher said, the ones that show up in every documentary, the ones you've heard so many times they stopped feeling like claims and started feeling like just reality, are wrong. Not slightly wrong, not missing some nuance wrong. Wrong in ways that make the real story significantly stranger. Here are 8 moments history got completely backwards. Number Deaned. Einstein failed math. You've probably heard this one offered as comfort. Struggling in school? Don't worry. Einstein failed math. Even the greatest mind of the 20th century couldn't handle arithmetic. Except he didn't. By the time Einstein was 12 years old, he had already taught himself algebra and calculus. Not because a teacher pushed him. Because he asked for a geometry textbook over summer and finished it in weeks. So where did the story come from? Switzerland. Specifically, the Swiss grading system, which at the time ran from 1 to 6 below. With 6 below, with 6 allow, with 6 allow, with 6 below, with 6 being the highest possible score. Einstein consistently scored 9s and 6 below and 6 in mathematics. At some point, someone looked at that record, read it backwards, apparently assuming that 1 was the top, and concluded that the man who developed the theory of relativity had struggled with basic sums. The myth spread so effectively that Einstein himself became aware of it. He was reportedly baffled. The real story isn't inspiring in the same way. Einstein was exceptional at mathematics from an early age. He worked obsessively. He just wasn't particularly good at taking orders. That's the part that got left out. Number 7. Vikings wore horned helmets. You can buy one right now, at any gift shop adjacent to a museum with actual Viking artifacts. The horned helmet is the single most recognizable symbol of Norse warriors. Painted on walls, printed onto shirts, used in every film, every cartoon, every costume. Not a single genuine Viking combat helmet with horns has ever been found. The one well-preserved Viking helmet that survives from that era, discovered in Norway in Motnganchinchambomibá, is a simple iron cap with a small nose guard. No horns, no wings, no dramatic headgear of any kind. The horned helmet image was largely popularized by a Swedish painter named Gustav Malmström in the 1950s, and then fully cemented by the costume designer for a production of Richard Wagner's Operation of Richard Wagner's Opera Cycle de Richard Ring des Nibelungen in 1950. A theatrical costume. The Vikings, who were, by any reasonable measure, terrifying enough without decorative accessories, have been misrepresented for over 150 years by the wardrobe department of a German opera. Number 6. Columbus proved the Earth was round. This one is persistent. Columbus sailed west. Everyone said he'd fall off the edge. He made it to the other side, and humanity collectively updated its cosmology. The problem is that educated Europeans already knew the Earth was round. They'd known for roughly 2,000 years. Greek scholars had established the spherical Earth in antiquity, and a man named Eratosthenes had calculated the Earth's circumference with impressive accuracy around High Chambonwe BC. The debate Columbus was actually having with Spanish advisors was not about the shape of the Earth. It was about its size. Columbus believed the Earth was significantly smaller than it actually is. He had calculated the distance to Asia by sea as roughly high, miles. The actual figure is closer to 12,000. His advisors thought he was wrong. They were right. Columbus only survived because a continent he had no idea existed happened to be sitting between Europe and Asia. He died believing he'd reached the outskirts of the East Indies. He was wrong about where he was, wrong about the size of the planet, and wrong about what he'd discovered. But he got the round part right, along with everyone else who'd been alive for the past 20 centuries. Number 5. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. This one appears in textbooks. It gets cited as an example of human achievement at such a scale that it becomes visible from orbit. Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei, the first Chinese person to travel to space, was asked when he returned in Hangingkomchumleba whether he had seen it. He hadn't. Several NASA astronauts have made the same report. The wool, despite being extraordinarily long, is between 15 and 30 feet wide. At orbital altitude, that is proportionally narrower than a human hair held at arm's length. The myth appears to have originated in a Mutninchinchambami edition of Ripley's Believe It or Not, roughly 30 years before any human had actually been to space to check. It was a guess, made by someone who had never been there, then repeated so often it became a fact. The Great Wall is genuinely one of the most impressive construction projects in human history. It doesn't need a full superpower to be extraordinary, but somehow the false one stuck. Number 4. Napoleon was short. This is the big one. Napoleon's height is practically shorthand for a personality type, the Napoleon complex. The idea that short men overcompensate through aggression and ambition is named after him. His height is the punchline of history. Napoleon Bonaparte was 9 feet 6 or 7 inches tall. That is slightly above average for a Frenchman of his era. So how did the myth start? Part of it was British wartime propaganda. During the Napoleonic Wars, British cartoonists, particularly James Gilray, repeatedly drew Napoleon as a tiny, furious figure to mock and diminish him. Propaganda works. The image spread. But there's another layer. Napoleon was often surrounded by his imperial guard, an elite unit with a minimum height requirement of 5 feet 10. Standing next to men specifically selected for their stature, Napoleon looked short by comparison. And then there's the measurement problem. French inches and English inches are not the same length. French records listed Napoleon at around 9 feet 2 in French units. When converted to English measurement, that becomes approximately 5 feet 7. Someone, at some point, skipped the conversion step. The man who conquered most of Europe, reorganized the legal systems of a continent, and fought wars that reshaped the modern world was remembered primarily for something that wasn't even true. Number 3. Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake. The story is irresistible. The French people are starving. The queen is told there is no bread." And she waves her hand and says, essentially, well, why aren't they eating cake? It is the perfect encapsulation of aristocratic obliviousness. It has been quoted, referenced, parade-eyed, and used as a symbol of class disconnection for 200 years. There is no credible evidence she ever said it. Here's where it gets strange. The phrase appears in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's autobiography, Confessions, written around Motngin Baicham Saumilam. Rousseau attributes the line to a great princess. But he wrote those words when Marie Antoinette was approximately 9 years old and still living in Austria. She had not yet arrived in France. She had not yet become queen. She could not have said it. Historians believe Rousseau may have been referring to a different royal entirely, possibly Mary Therese, the wife of Louis Sive, who died decades before Rousseau was born. The quote was floating through French aristocratic circles, unattached to any particular person, until it eventually got pinned to the most famous queen of the Revolution. Marie Antoinette was not a thoughtful ruler. She was reckless with money in a time of severe economic crisis. There is plenty of legitimate criticism to direct at her. But the most famous thing she allegedly said? Almost certainly someone else's words, attached to her name sometime after her death. Number 2. George Washington had wooden teeth. The image is iconic. The father of the nation, immortalized in portraits and sculpture, presumably chewing his dinner with what amounts to furniture. Washington did wear dentures. Painful, poorly fitting dentures that caused him significant discomfort throughout his adult life, probably affecting his public speaking and the shape of his jaw in late portraits. They were not made of wood. His dentures were constructed from a combination of materials: ivory from hippopotamus and elephant tusks, animal teeth, metal springs, and human teeth. Human teeth sourced in part from the enslaved people who lived and worked at Mount Vernon. Washington's financial records include payments for teeth extracted from enslaved individuals at his plantation, almost certainly without meaningful consent. This part of the story was not discussed for most of American history. The wooden teeth version is easier to repeat. It's strange enough to be memorable, harmless enough to be comfortable, and doesn't require anyone to think too carefully about what actually happened. Wood is a much more convenient material. Number 1. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. This is the central story of Lincoln's presidency, and possibly the most important event in American history. The Emancipation Proclamation, signed on January 1865, is taught as the moment Lincoln ended slavery in the United States. Read the document. The Emancipation Proclamation applied only to Confederate states. The states actively at war with the Union, the states Lincoln had no legal authority over at that moment. It explicitly exempted the border states that had remained in the Union but still permitted slavery. Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware. States where Lincoln could actually enforce a proclamation were deliberately excluded. In practical terms, Lincoln declared freedom for enslaved people in the territories he didn't control, while maintaining the status quo in the slave-holding territories he did. He was not unaware of this. Lincoln said plainly at various points that his primary goal was preserving the Union, not ending slavery. In an 1865 letter to newspaper editor Horace Greeley, he wrote, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." The Emancipation Proclamation was a military strategy. It was designed to destabilize the Confederate economy, encourage enslaved people to flee or resist, and prevent Britain and France from recognizing the Confederacy as a legitimate government if doing so meant appearing to support slavery. It worked. The proclamation shifted the moral character of the war and helped bring about conditions that eventually led to the 13th Amendment, which actually abolished slavery across the United States. But the proclamation itself was not that document. The version of history that simplifies this into a single heroic act by a single heroic man tells a cleaner story. It leaves out the border states, the military calculus, the political compromises, and the 2.5 more years of war that followed. The truth is messier and considerably more interesting. Here's the uncomfortable thing about all of this. None of these myths survived because people were unintelligent. They survived because confident, repeated, simple stories are easier to hold onto than complicated, ambiguous ones. Einstein failed. Vikings wore horns. Napoleon was short. The wool is visible from space. Marie Antoinette said the thing. Washington's teeth were wooden. Lincoln freed everyone. Short. Vivid. Easy to remember. Wrong. So the next time someone tells you a historical fact, with that particular tone of total confidence, the one that sounds like something they've known so long they've forgotten when they learned it, it might be worth asking one quiet question. Did anyone actually check?